This was Joe Russell, Sloppy Joe. And one day the owner of the building went up to Joe Russell and said, I'm raising the rent $1 a week. And Joe Russell said, there's no way I'm going to pay you an extra $1 a week. Forget that. So one evening, he had everybody that was in Sloppy Joe's. They got all the tables, the chairs, all the alcohol. They got everything. And they walked it down the street to the far right corner. There it is, Sloppy Joe's on Duval Street. That's been Sloppy Joe's since 1937. Now on the right, this large red brick building is the old City Hall in Key West, built in the late 1800s. Now years ago, the first floor level of this building on the right here was a public market. In the rear of the building, that's where they had the fire station. You had the fire trucks and all the fire equipment were kept in the back of the building. So now it's the old City Hall at Key West. And a little further on in the tour, we'll take a look at the new City Hall at Key West. We'll see that building a little further on in the tour. Ahead of us here is Duval Street, the most famous street on the island. Now we do have all kinds of activities on the island throughout the year. The biggest festival by far, that's Fantasy Fest. That's the last week in October during Halloween. Every year we get about 40,000 people that come to Key West to celebrate Fantasy Fest, and it really is an exciting time to be here on the island. We have all kinds of activities throughout the week. At the end of the week, Saturday night, down Duval Street. Ahead of us here is Duval Street. We have the big parade, the grand finale, over 75 floats. It really is fun and exciting time to be on the island. We've been celebrating Fantasy Fest here in Key West for almost 40 years, so it really has become a wonderful tradition on the island. Well, let me tell you where we get the name Key West. When the Spanish explorers first arrived here on the island, they found human bones. So they assumed the Indians had done battle here. Because of those bones, they named this place Cayo Hueso, or Bone Key. Later, the English, they came along and they corrupted the pronunciation of Cayo Hueso into Key West. So Key West derives from Cayo Hueso. It's Cayo Hueso, Cayo Hueso, Key West. That's how we get our name down here. Okay, if you need a change of attitude in latitude, maybe a cheeseburger in paradise. Ahead down the street on the right will be Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. Jimmy Buffett, the famous singer, his restaurant and store. It's a very popular spot on the island. You always have bands playing music there. It really is an exciting spot on the island. We got a lot of traffic, a lot of people in town. So ahead of us, Margarita, Jimmy Buffett. Yeah, we got our big season. We're busy on the island right near the hotels are all full, almost 90% occupancy. So it's, we're a lot of people visiting. We have Thanksgiving and Christmas right around the corner. And that's when we really are super busy, especially the Christmas holiday. Everybody on the right, here it is, Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. On the right, this cream-colored building with a triple arch is the San Carlos Institute, founded in 1871 by the Cuban community of Key West. Today it's a Cuban-American heritage and cultural center. On the left here, the Strand Theater. The theater was built back in the 1930s and it quickly became the most popular spot on the island. Been extremely popular for many years. On the left corner, this white building with a blue trim is the only example of Art Deco architecture on that street. One of the few examples on the island of Key West. A beautiful building on it really is very different from the other buildings on Duval Street. Key West has blossomed into a very important port of call for cruise ships. The first cruise ship arrived in Key West back in 1969. And over the years, the number of cruise ships docking in Key West and the number of passengers disembarking from those cruise ships has steadily increased. So in the past, we have been a very important port of call for cruise ships. On the left corner, this white building with a green trim is the Green Narrator Bar, one of the oldest bars in the Florida Keys. That building dates from 1890 when it was originally a grocery store. They have a motto on the wall there that says, "See the lower keys on your hands and knees." So you get a different perspective of life from the Green Narrator Bar. On the right, this large white building here is White Church, is the Cornish Memorial AME Zion Church, founded in 1865. That makes this the oldest black congregation in Key West in the state of Florida. It was founded by Sandy Cornish and Caroline Simmons. Church itself was built back in the 1920s. And on the right, this area, Key West, here is known as Bahama Village. Yeah, Bahama Village was settled the early 1800s by Bahamians, mainly of African descent. They worked in the shipwreck, salvaging, sponging, and fishing industries, and many of their descendants still live here. On the left, on the other side of this red brick wall, we have the Ernest Hemingway House. For Ernest and his wife, Pauline, back in 1931, inside a very beautiful garden, the first swimming pool of Key West, and many cats. Some descendants of Hemingway's own six-toed cats. And we lived here on the left for 10 years, and did some of his most productive writing there. And after his tragic death in 1961, his widow sold the property to family friends who opened it up as a museum. Okay, everybody, if you look to the right and look up, you'll see the top of the Key West Lighthouse, built in 1847. You can climb 88 spiral steps to the top up there for a beautiful panoramic view of Old Town. And at ground level, on the corner, is the Lighthouse Keeper's Quarters, built in 1887, 40 years after the lighthouse. But it was built for two families, because it took two families to keep it operational 24 hours a day. They had separate living quarters that shared a common